if you've experienced it. If someone walked in on you in the middle of a conversation and you hear, or someone hears you say something that it sounds bad in the sentence. And so they hear it and they walk off, and suddenly you said this that you never really said. It was out of context, wasn't it? If they were there for the whole conversation, they would understand, hey, that wasn't that bad. It was in understanding what he was talking about. That makes sense. Absolutely. Okay, cool. But because they didn't get the whole context, it ruined it. An example in my life was I was a senior in high school. I had this really cool English teacher. I loved him dearly. He was a cool guy. He was right out of college, just a nice guy. And he also was a drama teacher. And so he was doing a play called MASH, you know, the MASH, the TV show and the movie. And so I was going to try out for a part in this play. And we were really good friends. I mean, we were friends, and I was a student. And so he gave me a note, because he was the assistant drama teacher. He wrote a note to me during class. He was sitting behind me, and he gave it to me. And it said this. It said simply, hey, if, when you get a part in the play, would you help direct it with me? I'm like, well, sure, that's not that bad. The problem was a guy who, listen, I am not a serious actor. You saw the things on the videos. I know I'm not that great. I know that. I enjoy it. I enjoyed it in high school. I liked it in college. You know, but it's not my thing. I'm not a thespian, an actor. I'm not. Ashley O'Connor, she is a great actress. She, very, very good actress. Yeah, that's plot. She was in a play yesterday. So she takes it seriously. I am not. But then you have those, and you probably have them in your class, those people who think they're actors, and they're like hardcore about it, but they're not very good at all. There was a guy named Josh. Who was that guy? He wasn't very good, but he was serious about it, and it was important to him. And he read the note behind my back, and he read this: when you get a part in the play, help me direct it. So he thought I was guaranteed a spot in the play. Well, he was furious, and he went all over the school telling how my teacher was cheating and lying and getting me in a part. I didn't earn it. Blah 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 blah, and it was nuts. And I had to confront him, and I said, well, I don't want to go through what I said, but I confronted him about it. I wasn't mean. I was very nice, and I said, you think I couldn't get a part if I wanted it? Well, no, then relax. But out of context, it looked really bad. And my teacher was really embarrassed by it. He's like, I'm an English teacher. I should have used better English in that letter to make it more clear. I'm like, it was none of his business. Out of context, it looked really bad. So, Romans 12:2, this verse is not an example of bad context, it's just an example of understanding full context. So what we're going to do, and it's a very simple form of this kind of way of reading Scripture, we're going to go just one verse before this verse. That's all we're going to do right now. Go one verse before. Now, normally I would say read the whole book of Romans to get an idea, but we're going to just go one verse. And the first word we see is therefore. And we have to stop right there. In college, we were taught that if you see the word therefore, you ask one question. What is it there for? So you ask, why is it therefore? Why is it there? Well, I don't know. Well, let's just simplify it. Let's go one verse before that. And that's Romans 11:36. It should be up there, I think. And I'm going to give you just a basic paraphrase for the whole chapter 11. We got the Jews and the Gentiles, they're kind of fighting, and they're arguing about really who's more important. The Jews say, well, you know what, we have the covenant of God, we have the law, we are more important than you. And the other side, Gentiles being the non-Jews, they would have said, well, you killed Jesus Christ, first of all. Second of all, you lost the covenant because you didn't follow through with it, so God then chose us to be his people. So there's a whole argument, and both sides are wrong, period. Because God said, I open it to all of you. You're all welcome in my kingdom. But that's the argument. And so there was a whole idea of arrogance going on here, and a whole idea of I'm more important than you. So the last verse kind of paraphrases what Paul's trying to say. For from, capital H, him, and through him, and to him are all things. To him be the glory forever. So that's simply it. He's saying Christ is everything. Anything else is not as important. So stop thinking you're so much more important than everybody else. So because of this truth that God is everything, Christ is everything, now we can go to verse 1 and say, therefore, because Christ is everything, therefore, which is the next slide, I think. I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. Because Christ is everything, we need to be holy. We are spiritual. We are going to sacrifice who we are because of Christ is everything. I am nothing. I will sacrifice that, and I'll be presented to Christ as holy. For later on we learn, because Christ said, God, it was said by God, for I am holy, you are holy. So knowing now that, okay, Christ is all things, he's everything, therefore I must be a sacrifice, a holy sacrifice. Now we can go to the next verse. It says in verse 2, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. So, if Christ is all things, is everything, I now can sacrifice who I am, knowing that Christ is everything. I am nothing. So Christ can take over. I'm a sacrifice in that. Now I need to recognize this world that I live in, I can't be like it. And this was 2,000 years ago. And man, is it ever true today. We look just like the world, don't we? We look and sound just like the world. Do not be conformed by the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And the next verse. For through the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you not to think more highly of himself, which goes back to chapter 11, of himself than he ought to think, but to think so as to have sound judgment, as God has allotted to each a measure of faith. If we recognize that Christ is everything, recognize, okay, if Christ is everything, I'm kind of going through the same thing on purpose. I can sacrifice who I am and let God take over. I will be holy because God is holy. If I can do that, then I can stop being like the world and let the renewing of my mind through Christ transform who I am. And now I can see myself clearly. I know who I am. I am nothing because Christ is everything. And I can stop thinking I'm everything. Our country, I love our country, but man, we are an arrogant people. We got it all figured out. We can do it better than anybody else can. That's how we live our life. Here's the truth. I met with a youth a couple weeks ago. Sat and had lunch with them. And we talked for a while, and he said to me, I thought church would be different. And all I could do was kind of embarrassingly smile. It should be different. But too often it's not. Too often the people in the church are the same as the people in the world. Too often I've known people who have never been in church who are more righteous than people I've met in church. And it's embarrassing because I've been that person probably recently. I've been the hypocrite. Look at our own lives, we probably recognize, I probably have been too. Who I've been has been influenced by the world. And I've come to look like the world. I've let it kind of change and mold me a little bit. I want to kind of explore, this is what we do. I want to kind of explore two words in that verse 2. Conform and transform. And now the English language does a really good job of butchering words. You know that. If you look up a word in the dictionary, it has like 17 different meanings. And I love using an example, the word love. I use the word love to describe pizza, my dog, my kids, my wife, and ice cream. And it's the same word for all those things. It doesn't mean the same thing. Oh, that's kind of weird. It's really weird, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to look at the English version of the word conform, which I'm not going to go through all of them, but just hit the next slide, should be. It's really small, I'm sorry. I was ready to act in accordance or harmony, to comply. It's 5 different meanings of the word conform in simplydictionary.com. I don't want to go through all of them because they're boring. But there's a lot there. So what does he mean? What does Paul mean? Well, the beautiful part is, in Greek, we know that really the words had less meanings. There were fewer of them. So we're told in college, don't go through all the Greek because people get bored and they shut off. I get that. I'm sorry. I want you to just see these 2 words in the Greek to know what they mean, because it changes the meaning of the verse. Or it gives us more understanding for the meaning of the verse. So in the Greek, and I'm going to try to pronounce it to you in Greek, the best part is they don't speak it anymore, not like this. So if I say it wrong, you can't tell me I'm wrong because you don't know, because I don't even know if I'm wrong or not. All right, so the word is, I put it in phonetics there, suske mati zeste. It's pretty good, wasn't it? I know, right? Am I wrong? You have no idea, and neither do I, so it's fine. And it means to form or mold after. That's it, to form. So, do not be formed like the world. Do not be formed or molded after the world. And another translation says this, do not be conformed to the ways of the world, to be molded after. Another verse using the same word, so we can kind of get a little bit of context there, is 1 Peter 1:14, and it says this, as obedient children, do not be conformed to the same word there, conformed to the former lusts which were yours in your ignorance. But like the Holy One who called you, be holy yourselves also in all your behavior. In all your behavior. It doesn't say when you feel like it or when you think about it. In all your behavior, be holy. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to me. Because it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. There's no question there. There's no ... It's definitive. Because I am holy, you must be holy. I am your God. Not me, that's what God said. Sorry. So let's look at the word transform. In the English dictionary, transform has kind of fewer meanings. And small, I'm sorry. To change in form, appearance, or structure. I love this word, metamorphose. To change in condition, nature, or character, convert, to change into another substance, to transmute. All right. In the Greek, the next slide, it's a very, very simple word. Go ahead. It looks weird. Metamorphose. Or metamorphose. Isn't that cool? It's kind of cool. Metamorphose. To metamorph. Does that give you a different picture in that verse? Do not conform. Do not be molded like the world, but be metamorphed by the renewing of your mind. Is there a different image there for you? It was for me. It blew my mind. I was like, duh. I think of what? You think of what? When you hear the word metamorph, what do you think of? You think of a butterfly, right? And you have this little caterpillar, this little, chubby little thing, and it crawls around the ground, and it kind of just scoots. It's not a caterpillar. If we were doing charades, you'd never get that. I don't know. One-handed clap. No. Finger. There we go. Thanks, babe. Yeah, and it doesn't do, all it does is eat. It eats, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It has really no purpose other than just to eat. And then it becomes, I'm not going to go to science, cocoon. And then it becomes a butterfly. and suddenly the whole world's opened up to it. It can fly. And it's beautiful. Do you think a butterfly would look back at its old life as a caterpillar and say, I miss that life? I miss being on that leaf and just eating all day long. Now, that sounds kind of good sometimes. If I could fly, I'm never going back to being on that leaf the whole day long. There's no way. But how often in our faith do we get excited about Christ? We get on fire for who God is, and we're like all in. We're all in. And we're doing our thing, and we're in love with Christ, and we're doing it so intensely and so intentionally. And then we get back into the world, and flying doesn't seem as cool as it did a minute ago. And we begin to revert back to a caterpillar because we're being conformed or formed or molded into the patterns of this world rather than being transformed by the renewing of our mind through I'm paraphrasing here, through Christ Jesus, because we know that Christ is all things, through, to, and for, and from, period. And we know that, then we can recognize we're not as important as we think we are because Christ is everything, therefore I am nothing. I can renew my mind through the Holy One because if He is holy, then I must be holy. And another verse that uses the same word. Well, I want to get to this first. Brennan Manning said this, and it should be the next slide. This is a verse that is extremely powerful. Not verse, a quote that's extremely powerful. And I may have used it here before, I don't know. The greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Him with their lips, walk out the door, and deny Him by their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable. We are our own worst enemy sometimes. Because if we aren't transformed, and we just come here on Sunday and Wednesday and we put on the pretty little face, the holiness is a shroud we put on when we feel like it or when it's convenient. But then we go back into the world, man, people see that. I may never see it. I may never see you at work. Sean may never. You may be 100 miles away wherever you live. I don't have any idea. And no one will ever see you who goes to this church. So you can do whatever you want to do. But they're going to notice you. And they'll call you hypocrite. And they'll never know Christ because you were the Christ they saw and you were fake. I have no idea how many people I have kept from the Father from my hypocrisy. I don't even want to know. It's embarrassing. But here's the truth. If Christ is all things, I don't want to depress you. I don't want to get too sad here. If Christ is all things, I can have confidence in that. If I am nothing and Christ is everything, I can recognize I'm not as important as I think I am. And if that's true, I can find strength in who He is and let Him direct my life. And now, because He's leading me, not the world, I can be transformed, I can be metamorphosed, I can be turned into whatever He has to turn me into, whatever that is. We talk about the members. In fact, later on in this chapter, it talks about the members of the body and how we tend to give more credit or more credence to certain members of the body, and how often the eye wants to be the ear, or the ear wants to be the mouth. And if the ear was the mouth, what would listen? If the eye was the nose, what would see? Every member is important, and a lot of times what we think is the least important part of the body, the feet, they stink, right? No one wants to wash those things. If we didn't have them, that'd be awful, wouldn't it? I think I'd rather be without one eye than without a foot, personally. But we think the eye is more important than the feet are, a lot of times. That's how we treat them, isn't it? Christ gives no weight in who we are, because the gifts He's given us are the gifts that He's given us. I love what Sean said a week ago or 2 weeks ago. He said, if you're called to be, and this just kind of scared me at first, if you're called to be a pastor and there's no higher calling, I was like, I don't know if that's true or not. Then he said, if you're called to be a cook, there's no greater calling for you. I'm making up the way he said, but if you're called to do children's ministry, there's no higher calling for you. If we're transformed by Christ, by the renewing of our mind, what I do for Christ has nothing to do with me. None of that credit or a pat on the back or recognition or money. It's about doing it for Christ. Another verse using the, actually I think I did something else first. Sorry, so next slide. Four things I want you to remember. Recognize that Christ is all things. That's in Romans 11:36. Yeah, sorry. Look at that in a minute. Christ is all things. Next slide. Strive to be holy. Recognize that we are not any better than anyone else. We have to stop being like the world. Another verse using transform is this, 2 Corinthians 3:18. But we all, this is a beautiful imagery, and I want you to picture this, what it's saying. But we all, with unveiled faces, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord, the Spirit. Can you picture that? Looking in the mirror, unveiled. So there's no makeup. There's no false mask. It's simply who we are completely. Unveiled. And we see God's glory in ourselves. Not because we put it there, because God put it there. And we're being transformed into His glory through His work in our lives because we have recognized that Christ is everything. We know that because of that, I am nothing. Through that, I know that I can be transformed and stop being conformed because at the end of the day, I would rather follow Christ in a short life as a butterfly than live a long life as a caterpillar. We're going to move into communion. And this is different. This is off the book, so sorry, Sean. It's not pretty plain. And I think that this, what's being said, hopefully what's being heard, really works into communion. Because in communion, it is a symbol of the body and the blood. And we have to examine ourselves before we can take